The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. Of course, you're Commander-in-Chief Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Congratulations to the Boston Celtics for raising banner 18, getting it done 4-1 over the Dallas Mavericks. Much to be expected there. We will talk so much more about that series tomorrow on the podcast. But once again, congratulations to the Boston Celtics for getting it done. And Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and all those guys, especially Al Horford, getting that monkey off of their backs and getting their first NBA championship. So a couple of topics of discussion tonight. This is going to be a weird week content-wise. Obviously, Juneteenth is smack dab in the middle of the week. I don't know if that's going to matter or if it's going to disrupt the flow of anything. But Super Friends stream tomorrow. I'll have the podcast tomorrow as well. I'm trying to decide between Thursday and Wednesday in terms of when I'm going to go live for the official Command Post Live show. This may serve as the official show for the week. We'll see. Hopefully I can get back in front of you live on Wednesday or Thursday. Obviously, there's not going to be anything that, necessarily comes up that's going to warrant us to do something, right? So we'll just kind of play it by ear, right? Obviously. So number of topics, though, that I did want to knock down tonight. One, Austin Ekeler talked today with Kay Adams on her show, Up and Adams, about why he left the Chargers. Not a big surprise there. He essentially said it was not a fit. You could see what Jim Harbaugh was going to do, right? He's a guy that wants to establish the run, be physical up front. They drafted a tackle and then went out and signed every Baltimore Ravens running back they could find, right? Gus Edwards and all of these big physical bruising type backs, and brought those guys into the fold. So he's like, Austin Ekeler was like, look, they're looking for guys that can hand the rock to 300 times in a season. That's just not how I'm built. That's not who I've been in my career. And then Austin went third person on me, and I was like, whoa, buddy, wait a minute. What are we doing right now? Okay. He's like, that's just not going to allow Austin Ekeler to be the best version of Austin Ekeler. And I'm like, wait a minute. Hey, buddy, what are we doing right now? I thought you were one of the cool ones. What are we doing right now? And he's like, so, I wanted to go somewhere where Ekeler could be the best. I was like, oh, okay. That's another third person reference. Then he finally used the word I. Said, well, wait a minute. What were we just doing there? What just happened there, Mr. Ekeler? So obviously it wasn't a great fit. I don't know if the Chargers really wanted him back anyway, to be honest with you. Maybe there was some sort of intrigue there on the Chargers' part if he wanted to come back, because he didn't sign for a ton of money, obviously. So it's not like, they couldn't have done the deal if they wanted to. I just don't know if he fits what they wanted to do anyway, right? But maybe there was space for him if he wanted to come back, and maybe he just didn't see the role and the vision for what he would have been asked to do. And again, it doesn't fit. His skill set doesn't fit what Jim Harbaugh wants to, do with the running back. So then we saw over the weekend, I think it might have been Friday, that all of the draftees were signed. Jaden, so many of these damn Jalen's and Jadens and, McDaniels. There's a Jaden, a Jalen McDaniels, a Jaden, a Jaylen Brown. There's too many of these damn Jalen's and Jadens. Jaden Daniels signed his deal. I want to say it was Friday. And he, Brandon Coleman, and Johnny Newton, I think, were the last three to sign. and they all got their deals hammered out before this little, hiatus here, before this started training camp. And so the entire draft class of 2024 has been signed. They've all inked their deals. And so that is now in the rear view. So good for the organization to get all of that stuff done, get all the particulars out of the way. I don't know if you guys saw, but Ladd McConkey became the highest paid 34th pick ever in the NFL draft. The Chargers gave him the most guaranteed money. We'll probably talk more about that on the podcast, but I'm glad that, Johnny Newton didn't see that and say, hey, wait a minute, what about me, right? Because, that's what happens sometimes. So we'll see what happens in the future with some of these picks. There's a domino effect when these things start to take place, start to get worried sometimes. Good to see that we got our entire draft class locked up and ready to rock and roll. Then there's old Brandon Aiyuk. And this is not the first time we've had this conversation, clearly. He resurfaced again. And look, this is going to be an ongoing saga until there is resolution in San Francisco. Similar to T. Higgins, I don't think there's going to be resolution for Brandon Aiyuk, unlike T. Higgins, who recently signed his 1-year franchise tag tender. Aiyuk is still technically under contract. He wants to be paid, but he was never a free agent. They didn't have to use the franchise tag on him. He's going into the final year of his rookie contract. They picked up the 5th-year option, as you would expect them to, and that's what he's going into. And so he's obligated to show up. He'll be at camp when it starts. Will it be a hold-in, or will he just go in and participate? I'd like to think that he'll just go in and participate. I can't see, similar to T. Higgins in Cincinnati, I don't see any resolution in terms of a trade or anyone trading for T. Higgins or Brandon Aiyuk. Let me establish that right now, up front and center. I don't expect anything to transpire. If something were going to take place, it would have happened by now. Maybe at the trade deadline, a team feels like they're close to winning something, and maybe they feel like Brandon Aiyuk is the missing piece. T. Higgins is the missing piece. Those guys are having really good seasons up until that point. Maybe then and only then there's something get done. But my gut tells me you're talking about 2 Super Bowl contending teams as long as they're healthy, in the Cincinnati Bengals and the San Francisco 49ers. Those teams are better with those individual players on the roster. This could be their last shot to have those players on their roster. They're going to try and take full advantage of that last year of service before a decision has to be made. In the case of T. Higgins, because you've used the franchise tag, you don't have that at your disposal next year. I mean, you do technically, but you're not going to pay the price to do it and use it again. He's going to end up walking unless they do something like trade him at the deadline. And again, someone would have to want and be willing to give up more than a 3rd-round pick, because again, he'll leave in free agency, and the Bengals more likely than not will net a 3rd-round selection in a compensatory manner. So again, Brandon Aiyuk, same thing with the 49ers, even more so. Like, I get that the 49ers drafted a couple of receivers, one most notably in the 1st round, in Ricky Pearsall. But Ricky Pearsall isn't ready to help the San Francisco 49ers win a Super Bowl championship like Brandon Aiyuk is. Yeah, and you have to understand that. And they want Aiyuk back. Let's make no mistake about it. They want him back in San Francisco. They just don't want to pay the price tag of what he's asking for. So this notion that they don't want me, which is what we'll get into here in a second, hogwash, okay? He's playing the game that you play when you want a deal and you can't get it. You scrub your social media. You play the game through the media. He went the social media route, perfectly fine, whatever, right? The only reason that there's any reason for us to be dragged into the situation is because our rookie quarterback is sort of kind of in the middle of this. Not truly in the middle, but I guess he's a casualty of the situation. And it's not like Brandon Aiyuk uploaded that video to TikTok without Jaden Daniels knowing. I'm pretty sure he told him what he was about to do, and he was like, yeah, go ahead, bro. It's whatever, right? Like, doesn't affect me any, right? Yeah, they'll drag us in there, and they'll throw around. And look, Jaden doesn't care. He would love it if Washington traded for his best friend, right? One of his best buds. He would love it. But it's not going to affect him one way or the other. I thought, Derek B sent me a clip of Pat McAfee talking about it. And he's like, well, looks like Brandon Aiyuk's on his way to Washington. You're right. Okay. That's what people do. They sensationalize things. I will say this is the second time there's been Brandon Aiyuk smoke heading towards the direction of the nation's capital in the DMV range. Is there legitimate fire? I ask you guys. And I'll take it a step further. There was a deal that FanDuel put out on social media. And we'll talk about the little TikTok video here in a second. There was a deal. Obviously, for those of you who are unaware of the significance of Jaden Daniels and Brandon Aiyuk and why those two continue to be connected, as you can see, in Jaden Daniels' freshman year at Arizona State, he was teammates with Brandon Aiyuk, who was then a senior. They played well together. Part of the reason Aiyuk went in the first round was because of Jaden Daniels' ability to throw the deep ball. Aiyuk made a ton of plays that year and kind of crafted himself into a first-round pick. Those guys have remained close through the years and are still very, very close and keep in contact. As we can see, they were on FaceTime with one another during that TikTok video that Brandon Aiyuk put on his page. So this deal from FanDuel writes, who says no? All right. Washington receives Brandon Aiyuk from the 49ers in exchange for wide receiver De'Ami Brown, both of them on their final years of their rookie contracts, so both on expiring deals, a 2025 second and a 2025 fourth round pick. Would you give up 2 draft picks, a day 2 and a day 3 pick, plus wide receiver De'Ami Brown for Brandon Aiyuk? Keep in mind that you have to pay Brandon Aiyuk. We have the money. Money is not an issue right now. We're not going to be paying a quarterback anytime soon. Some of the biggest deals that we only have 3 big deals. I can't stress this enough. We have 3 guys making north of $20 million. Nobody else is making over 10. Okay. So we're sitting pretty right now from a financial standpoint. Now, those numbers will change over the next couple of years, and you'll have some guys, getting up into the double figures like Frankie Louvu, who signed a, multi-year deal here, Dorrance Armstrong, Tyler Biadasz. Their deals will be $12 and $13 million in that range in the coming years. But it's still not up there with the likes of star players who are getting paid $25 and $28 and $30 million a year. We don't have those guys. We got Terry McLaurin, Jonathan Allen, and Daron Payne. Those are the 3 guys we're paying north of $20 million. No one else is making over 10. We got plenty of cap space. Money is not the issue. And by the time you get ready to pay Jaden, if he is the real deal, a lot of these deals will be off the books and there'll be plenty of, money to go around. Like, it's not an issue right now. However, those draft picks are another story. Could you split the difference? A second and a fourth and just make it a third in De'Ami Brown? I'd be more likely to entertain that. That second is huge. I've said this already. Seconds are like new first round picks now. It's hard for me to part ways with a second round pick, especially if my GM thinks he's as good as he says he is. One, we can just wait till he's a free agent next year. and pay then, obviously you're going to have to outbid other teams, but you don't think it would be easy to get Brandon Aiyuk to sign on the dotted line to come play for the general manager who traded back into the first round to get him, or the assistant GM who was a part of the brain trust that traded back into the first round to get him when he was in San Francisco coming out of college at ASU. And, oh, by the way, his best friend is the quarterback of the Commanders. You don't think he would want to sign here first if we were interested? This isn't like old times where we got to trade for a guy and outbid ourselves because we don't have any, free agency power, right? The times are changing. You can actually get guys to want to come to Washington again. It's not like it used to be where, hey, you got to trade for Carson Wentz, because if you don't, if he's got options, he's not going to choose Washington. When guys like Russell Wilson and Matthew Stafford were shitting all over us and like, nope, don't want to go there. Times are changing. Also, there are going to be wide receivers that come out in the draft that if you feel like you need another guy, you could draft another guy. It's interesting to see where the fan base kind of falls on this particular topic, because when we brought it up the first time, when the Brandon Aiyuk smoke started the first time, a lot of fans were like, yo, sign me up. What we got to give up? What do we got to do? How do we get our hands on him? Like, this isn't a bad deal, right? To give up a 4th and a 2nd round pick. I just would rather only give up 1 pick. And I don't want it to be a 2nd. And if you're the 49ers, I don't need to trade him for anything less than a 3rd, because I'm going to get back a 3rd, even though any 3rd round pick you get from a team is going to be worth more than the compensatory pick that you're going to get. It's still a 3rd round pick anyway you slice it. If you're an optimist, it's a 3rd round pick. Like when we traded Chase Young to the 49ers for a compensatory pick, it's a 3rd round pick. And it proved to be very, very fruitful for us. It landed us Luke McCaffrey. We'll see what it turns into, right? We'll see how good he is for us or not. But it landed us another player. And it was the very last pick of the 3rd round, right? Very last pick of day 2. We'll see what it nets us. If you're a pessimist, then, hey, it's essentially a 4th round pick, a compensatory pick is. Fine by me. It's still being spent on day 2. You can call it whatever you want. If I'm the 49ers, I'm not parting ways with a guy that can help me win the Super Bowl for anything less than a 2nd round pick. A 2nd round pick has to be included in the deal. Because if I just let him walk in free agency next year, I might be letting him walk being a Super Bowl winner. A guy that of the stature of a Brandon Aiyuk can help me win a Super Bowl. I might let him walk next year, but it'll be after he's helped me win a Super Bowl. And I'll still get a 3rd round compensatory pick for his services when he goes sign this massive deal elsewhere. Granted, it won't be in the 2025 draft as these picks are. It'll be in the 2026 draft. Doesn't matter. It's still a 3rd round pick. 49ers aren't hurting for draft capital, right? So for me, I'd definitely do the deal if it was a 3rd. For a 2nd and a 4th, I think I'd be a little bit apprehensive. The 2nd is what really gives me pause. I wonder how I would feel if it was a 3rd and a 4th. What's tough is if you're a GM, you don't want to go consecutive rounds without a selection. It makes you feel like now you have to make a trade back. Like if you don't have a 3rd and a 4th round pick, remember that year we didn't have a 3rd or a 4th round pick because of the Carson Wentz deal? And we drafted Jahan Dotson, but we traded back so that we could get ourselves in a position to have a 3rd and a 4th round pick. Remember that? We felt obligated to trade back. A lot of you were upset that we didn't make a selection. There were various players that were on the board at the time of Washington's initial pick before they traded back, Chris Olave being one of them. the safety from Notre Dame. I don't know why his name is escaping me right now, that the Ravens ultimately ended up taking. There are a few others too. I want to say somebody continued to bring up McDuffie as a guy that they wanted. I think that's the same draft McDuffie was in, Trent McDuffie, who's turned into one of the best nickel corners, if not the best nickel corner in all of football. So there were options available, and Washington traded back. We felt almost like it was a necessity to trade back because we did not have a third round pick, and I don't believe we had a fourth rounder either. I think we went first. I think do we have a first, no second and third, or was it a first, a second, no third, no fourth, and then we had a fifth? Whatever the case may be, it was something to that effect. Kyle Hamilton, thank you, Casper the Barbarian and Bradley Campbell. Kyle Hamilton. There were a lot of players in that mix that some fans would have liked to have stuck around and maybe entertained. Ultimately, you felt obligated to trade back because of the lack of draft capital that year. I think all of this is a moot point, honestly speaking, because I don't see any of this coming to fruition. I don't see a trade happening. I don't see, like as I mentioned at the top of the show, I don't see T. Higgins being traded from Cincinnati. He'll play out the final year there in Cincinnati on that franchise tag and see if he can't help elevate them to a Super Bowl before they let him go on his merry way. Same thing with Brandon Aiyuk. He can sit and be disgruntled and he can talk about they don't want me. Let's talk about that. So there's a TikTok video of Brandon Aiyuk FaceTiming rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels of the Washington Commanders, which is why it involves us. You know, he was chilling at the crib. Just two dudes kicking it, right? A lot of times people forget that these guys are humans and they're just like us, right? Just like you pick up the phone, call your homeboy, you on FaceTime or Duo, and y'all kicking it. That's what he was doing with Jaden Daniels. The only difference is Brandon Aiyuk is paying someone to film him doing everything, going through this process. I don't know if it's just for clout. I don't know if he's trying to gain favor through social media or if he's like setting himself up for a documentary down the road, i.e. like Kanye West did, you know, had the foresight to have somebody recording him, you know, in his journey all the way to superstardom. Again, I don't know if he knew that was going to transpire, but having somebody record you is pure genius, similar to The Last Dance. Having someone record your entire year, you know, the final year of your, you know, NBA career of your Jordan is pure brilliance. I don't know if he knew at the time what was going to happen and how valuable that would end up being, but it did. And Aiyuk is having someone kind of film a lot of what's going on right now. So the process of that, he's on the phone with Jaden Daniels, and Jaden Daniels has the camera turned around to highlights of Brandon Aiyuk in San Francisco. And Aiyuk's like, yo, turn your camera around, man. Like, I can't see you. Turn your camera around. And so, which the person that was filming is like, yo, they got me filming this shit, which you can't show that and, you know, make money off of it because that's NFL property. So you can't be showing like an NFL clip, which is why they were like, yo, turn that shit around, bro. Like, can't see you. So Jaden turns it around and is like, yo, what's up? And he's like, so what's going on? And he's like, they said they don't want me back. He's like, yeah, man. Jaden's like, what? He's like, yeah, they said they don't want me. And Jaden turns around. Jaden's stupid. He said, Mama! Like, that was really funny. That was really funny. A lot of people took that as, oh, the 49ers don't want him. Well, clearly Jaden Daniels would love to play with them. Washington should go and get him. Our name has come up multiple times. It's going to come up because of Jaden Daniels' presence. I still don't think it means anything. Right? I still don't view this as a likely deal. Even when he's a free agent, I still don't know if this is a likely destination. I think a lot of it will be based off of how this season goes, right? If Terry plays at a high level, more importantly, if Jahan Dotson and Luke McCaffrey play at a high level, then there's no need for Brandon Aiyuk. You're spending unnecessary money at a position where you've already spent money in Terry McLaurin. And if Jahan plays well, then you have to start thinking about, well, is he worth paying, right? And he's going to cost you a whole heck of a lot less than a Brandon Aiyuk. If you're smart and Jahan has a really good season, you may be able to get him paid next year, and it'll cost you a lot less because he's coming off of his best season, but it's still his first really good season in the league. And if you flash a little bit of money in front of him, he'll probably take it, right? If you're being smart and you're being proactive. If you see what he could potentially be, right? Because you have the money. That's the beauty of when you have this kind of financial flexibility, right? It gives you options, or as they like to say, optionality, right? You have optionality to where you can pay a guy a year earlier than you need to because you're not stressing out about, well, we got to worry about this guy next year and this guy the year after that. And, you know, this guy right here, his number balloons to 26 million next year. Do we need to move on from him? We don't have to worry about those decisions. Because financially, we're in as good of a place as one can be for the foreseeable future. This is the time. If we somehow hit an inside straight with Jaden Daniels in his rookie season like the Texans did with CJ Stroud, we could go for it next year. And then maybe going and signing a guy like Brandon Aiyuk makes sense at that point. If that, like you see what the Texans did. They went all in. It's not like they didn't already have receivers. It's not like they didn't draft Tank Dell and he didn't have a strong rookie campaign before he got hurt. It's not like they didn't have the Michigan kid tear it up last year and go well over 1,000 yards and they just paid him a brand new contract. It's not like they didn't already have receivers. They still went out and got Stephon Diggs. Why? Because they're going for it. Because you have to go for it if you got a guy on a rookie contract at the quarterback position and he's going into year 2. Your window is as wide as it's ever going to be open. Go for it. That's what you're hoping happens to Washington. But I think that would require us to skip steps. And I don't know if we're in a position to skip steps, to be honest with you. So, do I see anything happening here? No, I don't. What I do see happening, though, is an opportunity for something to transpire in the offseason should Washington exceed expectations in year 1 and Jaden Daniels goes out and murders the NFL as a rookie under Cliff Kingsbury in his first year. If that happens, then I could see Washington maybe getting aggressive in the offseason, similar to the way the Texans did in trading for Stephon Diggs. You won't have to trade for Brandon Aiyuk. He'll be a free agent next year. You'll have to pay a pretty penny. He won't be cheap. But I can see Washington then getting aggressive if that's the case. But again, I think a lot of it hinges upon how do you feel about Jahan Dotson? How do you feel about Luke McCaffrey? How do you feel about Terry McLaurin? Right? How do you feel about your top 3 receivers coming out of this upcoming season? If Terry's still playing at a ridiculously high level, Jahan is finally reaching his potential, and Luke looks like a solid third option, there's no need to go out and spend the kind of money that it'll take to bring in a Brandon Aiyuk. Excuse me. If Terry looks like he's a step slower or doesn't look like he's going to be the long-term number 1 answer at the receiver position, maybe you do entertain bringing in a guy like Aiyuk. Or maybe, you know, if Jahan Dotson looks like, nah, we might have missed on that first-round pick, you know, then maybe you go in that direction. Maybe. But I still think it's a long shot. What says you? Would you do that deal? Brandon Aiyuk for De'Ami Brown, a 2025 second and 4th round selection. So 2 picks in 2025, a second and a 4th, and wide receiver De'Ami Brown in exchange for Brandon Aiyuk. Would you do that deal? again, keep in mind, you'd have to pay him in addition to trading away those assets. You'd have to pay him. Would you be open to doing that deal right now, as we sit here on June the 17th? Would you be open to doing that deal for Brandon Aiyuk? All right, so I wanted to ask you guys a question. You know, I love doing this. I think that last year on a lot of fronts was disappointing. I don't have to explain to you on all the fronts, but I got a few of them off the top of the dome that are still relevant because those players remain here, right? Obviously, Sam Howell was disappointing. The whole Eric Bieniemy situation was disappointing. You know, just how everything kind of went last year. But all of those things had to happen in order for the necessary change to take place. If Bieniemy ended up being good last year, Sam ended up being good, Ronald might still be here, and we might not feel the way that we feel. Well, not might. We wouldn't feel the way that we feel right now, right? There would be some excitement over we might have our quarterback, but I don't think all of the changes that have taken place and all the things that have happened would have taken place had there been any semblance of success last year. That said, just because we sucked as a team didn't mean certain guys individually, you know, couldn't have played well and been silver linings in what was a very dark and disappointing season. But that didn't happen either. Nobody really stepped up and had a tremendous season outside of a select few. Sam Cosmi was probably the lone bright spot on the offensive side of the football. I shouldn't say that, because Curtis Samuel I thought was really good last year. He felt like, even though his numbers don't necessarily scream that he was that much better than the year previous, it felt like he was the only guy really contributing at a high rate in a lot of these ball games. But you could argue that the 2022 Curtis Samuel edition was better because he made more impactful plays. The catch against Minnesota, the big plays he made against Indianapolis. We don't win the Indianapolis Colts game without him. He made big play after big play after big play in that game. And there were several other games that year where Curtis Samuel just stepped up and had some, you know, monster performances or big plays in some big moments. That said, the standouts were few and far between. There were a lot more disappointments than there were standouts. So with that in mind, I want to pose this question to you. Who, in your mind's eye right now, stands to be the biggest bounce back player in 2024? Let me repeat myself. Based off of your expectations for players going in the last season, obviously most of those, if any, were not met. And with that in mind, now knowing what you know now about last season and how it went, how it transpired, and how disappointed you are with some certain individuals in their play on the field, who in your mind's eye is slated to be the biggest bounce back player for the Washington Commanders in 2024? So let's see what you guys have to say. I'm going to tell you who my guy is. I think in order to answer this fairly, I think you first have to acknowledge who you felt like was a disappointment last year. I'll start with Jahan Dotson. I think my expectations for him in that Chiefs offense and his ability in space and what we were told we were going to get, I set the bar pretty high for him. Now, I wasn't going crazy like some of you out there who talking about 1,200 yards, this, that, and the third, and all kinds of crazy cockamamie numbers that were being tossed out there. But I did think he was going to set a career high. I did have him up in that 800 to 900 yard range, and I wouldn't have been shocked if he eclipsed 1,000 last year. But I thought he'd be knocking on the door of 1,000 yards last season, somewhere in that 870 to 920 type range, right? I thought he'd be a high touchdown guy based off of what we got in his rookie campaign. You know, the small sample size and how he had the innate ability to find the end zone. Just figured he'd build upon that and he'd be the leading, you know, touchdown man at the receiver position for Washington. And I was expecting this extraordinary second-year leap that would set the stage for this coming season where we'd expect him to explode on some Devontae Smith type shit. Didn't happen, right? Clearly, there were games where we didn't even know if this guy was involved playing. I would always joke after games, well, it looks like Jahan Dotson got in some extremely awesome cardio today. And it was funny because I would use that phrase, and then Terry McLaurin literally said it after a game in the mid to, you know, latter portion of the season where he said, yeah, I was out there running some cardio because he didn't get the ball, right? So I thought Jahan's season was disappointing. Terry's season, I thought, was very disappointing. You could consider him for a bounce back season because he clearly did not live up to expectations, and it wasn't all his fault. You know, there was so many different factors that we could really have at play here in terms of why Terry's production was significantly compromised last season. But the bottom line is he needed a defensive stop, and the Cowboys essentially pulling all of their defensive starters and a wide receiver screen with less than a minute to go to get to 1,000 yards on the season. And as I told you before, I don't think I've ever been as happy for a meaningless play in my life. It was a shame how excited I was for him to get that 1,000 yards. Because that my emotion in that moment that was all loser behavior on my part. It was despicable, but I wanted it bad for Terry. He didn't deserve what happened last year, right? We all want what's best for him because he's been nothing but a model, you know, player, leader, receiver, everything that you could ask for. Like, we see all these guys crying for the football on the sidelines, throwing temper tantrums. We don't have to worry about that. Our guy doesn't do that, right? But it wasn't a great season for him last year. Who are we kidding, right? So he could definitely be on that list. I think another name for me was, and these are guys that are no longer here, so I don't need to name them. Right? That's irrelevant. Derek Force, coming off of what was I thought a really good, strong second season in the NFL, established himself as a starting caliber safety, free safety in the NFL. I really was looking for big things from Derek Force. And obviously the injuries derailed any opportunity for him to progress as the season went along, but it didn't start well for him either, right? Jamin Davis, you know, I don't think he was bad last year. You could argue it was his best season of his career. Got his first career interception. You know, he forced a fumble or two, I believe. Might have even recovered one. He, you know, was all over the field, got better in pass coverage. He was solid last year. But solid doesn't cut it when you're a former number one, you know, first round pick, essentially. We need more, right? I wouldn't necessarily classify him as a massive disappointment last year. That's not how I would view him. But you know who was a massive disappointment? And there were other young guys. Some of you put too much on the plate of young players. Like Forbes, to me, isn't in this conversation. Yep, they spent the first round pick on him, but He's a rookie. You know, all rookies, and I talk about this all the time, all rookies don't mature at the same rate. You can't watch one team's rookie and say, hey, he's over there doing that. Why isn't our guy doing that? Because they're not the same player. They're not in the same scheme. They're not being coached the same, not being deployed the same. And so there's a lot of varying factors as to why one guy has success immediately and the other guy doesn't. That doesn't mean our guy isn't any good or he won't be good in 2 or 3 years. It just means he's not good right now. Same with Quan Martin. A lot of people got on him in the preseason. It was ridiculous what happened. After one preseason game, fans were getting all over the kid. It's ridiculous. But the guy for me that was the biggest disappointment last season, and to me, it wasn't even close. And he's also qualifies and is my biggest breakout candidate this year. By far and away is Daron Payne. Daron Payne was coming off of an 11.5 sack season in 2022. Clearly, it was a contract year, and he balled out. Showed all of the promise and potential that we had been waiting to see unlocked since he was drafted out of Alabama in 2018. It all came to fruition in 2022. He was playing for the bag. They didn't pick up the fifth-year option. Did they pick up the fifth-year option? 18, 19, 2020. Yes, they did. He knew he was going to be a free agent. And instead of allowing the pressure of a contract season to get to him, he did the opposite. And we see a lot of guys step up in their contract years. We also see a lot of guys wilt under the pressure of playing in the contract season. See Devin White in Tampa Bay this past year. We see that quite often, as a matter of fact. We always talk about guys who blow up in a contract year. There are more guys who don't produce at a high level in a contract year than the guys that do. Payne was extraordinary in 2022. And I made this comment the other day, you could argue that at his particular position, because we had this conversation about, does Washington have a top 50 player on the roster? And if so, who is it? If not, who's the closest? It's Daron Payne for me because of the longevity. He's been a solid player in this league, above average pretty much his entire career since day one. But he took it to another level in 2022. I thought he should have been an all-pro. He was just a Pro Bowler. He should have been an all-pro in 2022. He's better than Dexter Lawrence to me. And I think Dexter Lawrence was the all-pro that year. And that pissed me off. But that's no here nor there. The bottom line is if you go to 2022 and you look at his defensive statistics, his impact on the game, tackles for loss, quarterback sacks, quarterback pressures, quarterback hits. He was as disruptive and consistent. This wasn't, oh, Daron went off in 4 games like Brian Orakpo used to do once upon a time against a third-string tackle and get 3 sacks. And at the end of the season, you look up, he's got 11 or 12.5 sacks. And you go, damn, Orakpo had double-digit sacks. Yeah, but he did it in 4 games against, guys that shouldn't even be on the NFL roster. What happened in the other 8, 9 games when he was playing starting caliber tackles? What did he do then? Nothing. Right? That's not Daron Payne. That's never been Daron Payne. He's been consistent, and he was outstanding in 2022. And I was looking for more in 2023. And he gave us glimpses. I always bring up the Denver game, week 2. He was outstanding in that game. There was one particular drive, early stages of the second half. I think it was the first drive, if I'm not mistaken, of the third quarter for the Denver Broncos. He single-handedly destroyed the entire drive. There's the Atlanta Falcons game last year where he was mic'd up. I thought he played really well in that game. But those moments with Daron Payne last year were too few and far between. My guess is Daron Payne had, I'm going to get my mobile device out. My guess is he had 4.5 sacks last year. He clearly didn't lead the team because this was one of the most embarrassing statistics I can remember as a fan watching this team over the last probably 15 years. And that's allowing Montez Sweat, who was traded before the trade deadline, to lead the team in sacks when he left Washington, remain the team leader in sacks, and finish the season as the leader in sacks for two different teams. That's vomit and cringeworthy. The fact that that man was gone for 2/3 of the season, or at least a half of the season, a little bit over half the season, Montez Sweat. We traded him after the Eagles game, which was week 8, I believe. There was still 9 more games to go. 10 more weeks of football, 9 more to be played. And nobody could surpass Montez Sweat's 6. I think he had 6.5 sacks when he left Washington. Give me a break. Guys like Daron Payne should have been able to eclipse that. Jonathan Allen. And we know he was dealing with the injury early in the season. And so was Payne. Remember, Payne, I think he was dealing with some stuff. I think he had a finger injury, if I'm not mistaken, that kept popping in and out. Matter of fact, I think he hurt it in the, I want to say it was that Falcons game. Might have been I think it was the Broncos game, actually. See what Daron Payne's numbers were last year. He had 4 sacks last year, after having 11.5 the year prior. Now, that's not to say he still wasn't disruptive and he still wasn't a good football player, because he still was. But in 2020, he had 11.5 sacks. He had 64 tackles, 18 tackles for loss, 20 quarterback hits. Remember, he had that safety early in the season against the Eagles that year as well. He was a monster. His 18 tackles for loss, I think, was only second to, like, I want to say it might have been Quentin Williams or somebody that was ridiculous that year. Like, he was a monster. 2023, 4 sacks. So 7.5 less sacks, 53 tackles, so 11 less tackles, 13 tackles for loss, so 5 tackles for loss less than the year prior, 11 QB hits, 9 less than the year prior. And while all of those numbers are solid, he did have 2 forced fumbles in 2023. He had none the year prior. But while those numbers are solid, he can be so much better than that, right? He can be so much better than that, and we know he can. And while you can make the excuse, well, look how many defensive snaps he was playing. Well, he was playing a lot of defensive snaps the year before too. That didn't just start happening. He's been playing 92% of the snaps. That didn't happen last year out of the blue. He's been doing that. And while I don't recommend that you do that with players, especially 300-pounders, which I don't think they're going to force him to do this year, which is, I think you're going to see him. This is why he's my candidate. You're going to see that rotation. As defensive coordinator Joe Witt Jr. already said, we're going to roll up with 17, 18 guys. We're going to roll up 17 or 18 deep and whoop people. So that means we're going to be rotating guys in, keeping these bodies fresh up front. Hopefully, these big guys are finally going to get a blow. We got the depth at defensive tackle, which is why, I mean, it's hard to take both of them off the field at the same time. And with Mathis being injured, it was always a little bit dicey. But hopefully we've got the depth now with Johnny Newton still having, and I don't know if they're going to keep a 5-man rotation there with Ridgeway and Fedarian Mathis, or if they're going to cut one of those dudes and it's just 4 of them. But whatever the case may be, with Newton being inserted into this mix, there's no excuse for these dudes to be playing 87, 91, 93% of the snaps. 96%. I mean, there were games where you go, bro, this man sat for 4 defensive snaps out of 67 snaps. He played 63 of them. Are you insane right now? Are you crazy? Even with that said, I know he can be better than what he was last year. He can be more impactful than what he was last year. And for that, because I've seen the man destroy games, be the best player on the field, be a disruptive force that we counted on week in and week out, and he delivered week in and week out. Having seen that for an entire 17-game slate, I know he's capable. I'm looking for Daron Payne to be the biggest bounce back player in 2024 with this new defensive scheme, with this coaching staff that understands feeding studs, as they call it. I look for Daron Payne, possibly Jonathan Allen on that interior to be two of the biggest beneficiaries on the defensive line in particular, but in the front 7. Getting to the quarterback, being disruptive, being penetrators, playing the kind of football that's going to allow Daron Payne to finally get, I think, the shine and recognition that he deserves. But he's going to have to go out and get the numbers and the statistics to back that up. And I think he's going to be able to do that this year. So if you're out there watching this on playback, leave it in the comment section. Love to read your responses. I loved reading the comments from the episode 3 of the Commander's Log and the recap that we did. That was a fun episode. That was a fun show, right? That entire show was all great vibes. I enjoyed that show thoroughly. The conversation that we had, the excitement that Commander's Log episode brought was great energy. And a lot of you found yourself getting sucked in. I could read it in the comments. Like you were like, I knew they were going to try to do this shit to me. A lot of you found yourself getting sucked in. So now the hardest part is the waiting. Now you got to wait. And I told you, this is the part that can get you into trouble. When you have this down period and this much time, people get in trouble when they're bored, which is why you always hear people talking about giving the youth something to do, having rec centers and activities available to kids so they're not on the streets getting into trouble, because when you don't have anything to do, you find something to do. Well, we're in that down period now and we don't have anything to do. So this is when you find yourself getting excited unnecessarily, and all of a sudden you go from 7 to 10 wins on the season. Be careful. We talked about that on Thursday, on that last episode of the Command Post Live. This is the part where it's okay to sip the Kool-Aid, but how much are you partaking in? How much are you indulging in? Right? Let's get to the comment section, see what you guys have to say, and we'll get out of here. John Perez, my guy JP, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy JP writes, Lou, I think you're going to be wrong about this one. Aiyuk is going to get moved while Higgins is probably headed for free agency. We'll see. I may be wrong about this. I just don't see any team, unless there's a major injury somewhere along the line in camp, which would facilitate a team who, and this team has to be a Super Bowl contending caliber, type team. Like the New Orleans Saints having an injury at receiver isn't going to prompt them to trade for Brandon Aiyuk. They weren't going to win the Super Bowl anyway, right? So what's the point of giving up draft capital? Unless you were going to sign Brandon Aiyuk in free agency next year, there's no point in you trading for him. And, while if you trade for him, you don't give him a chance to pick his team next year. You give him the money he's looking for, he's willing to sign, yada, yada, yada. But in order for him, to me, to get traded for, you'd have to knock the 49ers socks off with the deal. Can't just be a meager, like they don't have a gun to their head. They're not going to give Brandon Aiyuk away again. He means more to them, and he's worth more to them right now than he is just to give away to rid themselves of a headache. I don't even think he's a headache necessarily, right? I liken it to, your 2008 Honda Accord, right? Or Honda Civic. Yeah, it's got 149,000 miles on it, which is not bad for a 2008, to be honest with you. But you're trying to move it, right? You're ready to sell it. You've invested in a 2019. You got a nice car. You don't need the 08 anymore. It's just kind of sitting there. You don't really drive it as much, and it still works. And it could be of value to someone else, but you're not willing to give it away, right? Still comes in handy when the 19 has to go to the shop and you need another car. It still comes in handy, right? When you don't want to drive the 19, feel like running to the store real quick, you just jump in the 08, run to the store and come back. Like, it still serves a purpose for you. You're not going to give it away, but if somebody gives you a good enough offer, you're willing to move it. The 49ers aren't going to give Brandon Aiyuk away. And I think the only thing that's going to facilitate a trade is out of necessity for someone. And you've got to be a Super Bowl contending team and have one of your, star players go down to see something like that take place. So I don't see it happening, but you could be right. You might be right. Who knows? Barrett Downing, my guy, BD. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Barrett Downing. Right. Congrats to Boston. Absolutely. Salute to the Boston Celtics for getting it done, raising banner 18. He writes, now I'm all in baseball. Let's go Yankees. How you going to congratulate Boston and then talk about go Yankees? Oh, man. Did you guys see Dak Prescott show up at tight end U with a Yankees jersey on? He would be a Yankees fan, wouldn't he? I don't know if he's a Yankees fan or not. He strikes me as a guy that would be a Yankees fan. Typical. Cowboys, Yankees, Lakers. Metaphor. Been a member for 33 months. Greatly appreciate you who writes, what if it was only the second with Diami? I don't want to part ways with a second, but I'd strongly consider it. It's just one pick and a guy that we weren't going to re-sign anyway, right? I'd strongly consider it. And what you would essentially look at it is, would you be able to draft a receiver the caliber of a Diami Brown in the second round? The answer is probably no. I mean, I can't say that you won't be able to, but will that guy be able to help you right away at the level that Diami Brown or at the level, I think I said Diami Brown. Would you be able to draft a receiver the caliber of a Brandon Aiyuk in the second round? And the answer is probably no. And even if that guy is as good or does end up being as good as Brandon Aiyuk, still you probably wouldn't know that for another 3-4 years down the road, at which point, might be when we need that guy to start playing at a high level. But if you're really, again, that's why I said this. Aiyuk and the necessity to go get him, I think, is going to be heavily tied to the development of this team and specifically its quarterback. If Jaden Daniels looks the part and you say to yourself after the season, we could use another receiver or we could use an upgrade at the receiver position, then a guy like Aiyuk makes a ton of sense. If we leave the end of this season saying, hey, receivers were just fine, we're good with what we have, and then what's the point, right? Because what you don't want to do is overinvest in a position like receiver. The beauty of it is, though, I think Terry's deal only has 2 more years, this year and next year on it. So if you were willing to spend on a guy like Aiyuk, it's not like you would have, two massive contracts on the books for very long. But I think a 2 is something I would consider. I think it's the multiple picks that have me a bit apprehensive. I would prefer to keep my 2, but if the 49ers, 'cause again, if I'm the 49ers, I have no reason, unless I want my pick now, right? I want that pick in 2025. And in that case, a 2025 third rounder might do it, the trick, in addition to De'Ami Brown. But to me, if I'm the 49ers, I'm not hurting for a third round pick this year. I'd probably even be better served getting that third rounder the following year when I don't know how good we will or won't be. And so that compensatory pick might be of more value to them than getting it in 2025, if that makes any sense. So I essentially, I said all that to say this: I'd need a second round pick if I'm San Francisco. If I am to deal him, it starts at a second round pick. If you're not talking about at least a second, then we're not even having a conversation. Would I just do it for a second? Would the 49ers just do it for a second in De'Ami Brown? I don't know if they would or not. I think I would strongly entertain it. And I'd probably be leaning more towards yes, I would do that. Big Money Sonny, been a member for 33 months, almost heading towards that 3-year mark. My guy, Big Money Sonny writes, salutes, Lou. It's been a minute. Aiyuk ain't coming. Let's effing go. It has been a minute. Always good to chop it up with you. And I agree. I don't think he's coming here. But there is some Aiyuk smoke right now. And the smoke is rather thick. The question is there any fire to the smoke? My gut says no. There's no fire here whatsoever. To me, again, a guy like Brandon Aiyuk doesn't make a ton of sense for where we are in our maturation process. But if you were to see a CJ Stroud type of meteoric rise in year one from Jaden Daniels, immediately a guy like Brandon Aiyuk makes a ton of sense. Similar to where they went out and they already had guys at wide receiver. Right. Noah Brown had his best season of his career at receiver. The Michigan receiver, I always forget his dang on name. He was outstanding last year, right? Career year for him. And they still have Tank Dell. Still went out and traded for Stephon Diggs, though, right? Because now you're pushing your chips to the center of the table and saying, hey, let's go after the Super Bowl ring. Traded for Joe Mixon. Brought back the tight end Dalton Schultz. Went out and signed Danielle Hunter to a massive 2-year deal. Like, they're going for it. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. They're going for it in Houston. That's the scenario I could see Washington putting themselves in next year for Brandon Aiyuk, should Jaden Daniels ball out like CJ Stroud did last year. And now you feel like, oh, our window's open. Let's go for it. Then I could see them going after a guy like Aiyuk. I'm with you. I don't think he's coming here. Ace the One, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Ace the One writes, I think Jaden getting his contract guaranteed says something. Also, if the O-line is decent to good, we can really be good on offense. Our defense will be great. A lot of the earlier picks in the draft are getting a lot of their money guaranteed. I think we've seen this really seismic shift in deals where a lot of these players aren't as enamored with the totality of the deal, which of course you want to be the highest paid player at a position. That looks good for the agent. That strokes your ego, all of that good stuff. But what's more important, and it's always been what's most important, is the guarantees. How much are you truly walking away with? And I think the players and the agents, to their credit, have done a much better job here of late of securing more guarantees, right? It's cool to have a $300 million contract, but if you're only guaranteed 140 of it, that's less than half of the deal. You're not going to see the other 160 million of that deal, more likely than not. So The goal should be get as much of that money as you can. Get it in guarantees, right? Like we just saw that Trevor Lawrence deal. It was 275. I think like 200 of it, 225 of it is fully guaranteed. Like almost the whole deal. Like 175 of it was like guaranteed at signing, something along those lines. And I think 200 or 225 of it was fully guaranteed. Like that's what you want in a deal. And you're seeing more players, including the rookies. I just told you, Lad McConkey signed the highest deal guaranteed wise of any second round pick in the NFL history at 34 overall. The Chargers pretty much guaranteed his entire deal. That's unheard of. But you're seeing more and more of these rookies procure these deals where they're getting more and more. But it does speak to I think the guarantees speak volumes as to how they feel about his work ethic, what he's done thus far, and what he's shown them from a leadership standpoint, the work ethic. They think they got it right. Look, the offensive line is going to be a massive part of whatever happens this upcoming season. I still contend that really good play calling coupled with a mobile quarterback who is a threat to take off, coupled with the quick passing game, these are all things that can alleviate pressure on off the offensive line. A stable, consistent run game is also going to help them. I think there are a number of factors that can minimize this offensive line and the impact that they could or couldn't have if they're not very good, right? But at the end of the day, we need them just to be solid. We already know, as constructed, this is not going to be a fantastic offensive line. I think we've already come to that realization. They're not going to be spectacular in nature. They're going to be solid. We want them to be at least solid, slightly up to slightly above average. What we can't have is what we had last year, which is below average offensive line play. That's what we can't have. That'll give us a chance to fight offensively. And to your point, and I've said this already multiple times, and I'm going to continue to sing this song, and I hope I end up being proven right, because I haven't been this bullish on a defense in over 2 decades. You got to go back to 04 and 05's defense with Greg Williams at the helm as the defensive coordinator to find defenses where I was all in, invested 110%. That's how I'm feeling about this defense. We'll see if they prove to be the backbone of this team. I think they ultimately will. I think with a young quarterback and a lot of moving parts offensively and an offensive line that we're not 100% sure about, I think the defense will ultimately be the backbone of this football team. And they'll be the reason that we find ourselves in just about every single game this upcoming season. As I've mentioned, don't think we'll win a lot of these games, which will prove to be why we end up at 6 or 7 wins on the season. But we'll be in those games, and we'll learn, hopefully, from some of these close defeats, and we'll figure out how to learn how to win these games moving forward, and it'll make us a better team because of it, right? Let's see. Sean Moore, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, bro, I know you said he's been doing it sometimes. You keep doing the shit the wrong way. It catches up with you. Even the best defensive tackle wasn't playing that amount of snaps. Yeah, no, I agree. He played a lot of snaps, but you know what he did the year before? He played a lot of snaps the year before too, right? To me, it wasn't just the fact that he played a lot of snaps. I just don't think he played at a high level last year, a high enough level. And look, again, these are relative terms we're talking in. Daron Payne is better than the average defensive tackle. His numbers last year were better than most defensive tackles around the NFL, right? He still was very impactful in a number of ways, and he continues to be a guy that you can count on week in and week out, right? But the sad truth of the matter is that, yes, he did play too many snaps, but he had been playing a lot of snaps in previous years too. Maybe it was a little bit of an uptick last year, but he was playing a lot of snaps anyway. He had been doing that. So I think it was just a disjointed season. Guys weren't as locked in, and changes needed to be made. That's truly what I believe. And I think he got caught up in this whole season just being a wash and things not going well. And think he didn't play up to the standard that we expect from him. That's my honest, humble opinion. Again, I take Daron Payne. And remember, I've done a complete 180 on Daron Payne. Not that I didn't want him at all, didn't think he was a good football player. I just thought there were other guys. You guys know how I felt about him initially, right? And I was one of those people. I'm guilty as charged. I was one of those people. Up until about 2021, I think is when I stopped doing this. But, you know, anytime a conversation about a trade would come up in 2020, even the early stages of 2021, it wasn't until probably halfway through that 2021 season where I was like, hey, y'all got to stop trying to trade Daron Payne. Because we kept talking to, we were talking that Chase Young shit. Oh, man, Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Daron Payne, can't keep all of them. Can't keep all of them. Got to trade somebody. Got to do something. And, it'd either be Daron or Jonathan's name that would come up. Because everybody wanted to keep both of the ends. And you can only afford one of these defensive tackles. Can't keep all of them. And I was guilty at first of kind of succumbing to that. Hey, let's move Daron, right? Jonathan's the better leader. To that point, Jonathan had been the more productive guy. Hey, let's move Daron. I didn't want him in the first place. I quickly got over that though. And as that 21 season progressed and we could see, Chase getting injured and he wasn't producing at a high level, my view and my vantage point shifted to, Daron's probably the most consistent thing smoking on this defensive line. That includes Jonathan Allen. We need him. Like, if you want take somebody, take Jonathan Allen's ass. I shifted to that direction. And then I realized, well, Jonathan Allen's leadership is invaluable. Like, Payne's upside, you got to have it. And his ability, and we saw it come to fruition in 2022. And Allen's leadership, like, y'all can talk all the shit y'all want. And yeah, he rubbed some people the wrong way last year with his antics post-game. The guy wants to win. He got frustrated. And he wasn't doing a whole hell of a lot to affect games. Nobody was. He wasn't alone in that. And so people got on him last year. That was never my angle. I understood where he was coming from. I knew he was frustrated. And I know he just wants to win. And he's sick of losing. And he's sick of, continuing to see change here, but nothing actually changed here. I think this is the first time where he's actually been able to see real, tangible change from the front all the way down in the field. Now it needs to manifest itself in the wins, but his leadership is invaluable. You need guys like Jonathan Allen on your football team. You need those type of guys. Jamal Hamlin, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy Jamal writes, Lou, I hope all is well. Likewise with you and yours. I'm just kicking back and letting AP and DQ drive. I'm just enjoying the ride and not underestimating them. I've told you guys that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to enjoy the ride this year. Like, it's good. Again, it's going to be some, bumps and some twists and some turns, some ups, some downs. All that stuff comes with the in the course of an NFL season. But when you're young, the lows can be extremely low. The highs can be extremely high. But I all in all, it's just fun when you see a young team because the expectations aren't extremely high, right? What happens, happens. Nobody's expecting anything from this team. That's why we're somewhat dangerous because the expectations are extremely low. We got Dallas in this division. We got Philadelphia in this division. We can't beat the Giants. Who are the Commanders? Nobody. We got people still saying that we're going to be a 2-win team this year, a 3-win team this year. People still think we suck, and they still think this is the Daniel Snyder edition of this group, but it's not. It's a different group. And because of that, they're going to be much more competitive than they were last year, and they're going to win more than, 3 or 4 games or whatever some people have us predicted to do. But This is going to be a season of growth and development. And if we win a bunch of games along the way, awesome, even better. But the likelihood is it's a process, and in those processes, you got to take your lumps. And as we saw Detroit do in year one with Dan Campbell, as we saw the 49ers do in year one with Kyle Shanahan, and various other teams in year one of a new head coach coming into a situation where you're trying to build the organization back up. And a lot of times those situations are accompanied with a brand new GM as well. Like I just talked about with San Francisco, like I just talked about with Detroit. When you're coming in, you're cleaning the house, you're turning over a roster, brand new GM, brand new head coach, it takes a while, usually. Again, everybody wants to talk about the Texas situation. I've said this enough. I know I probably sound like a broken record. You're tired of hearing me say this. But, yeah, they had a new head coach and a new quarterback, but the GM wasn't new, and he had already started working on this roster. They already had some certain pieces in place. Did anybody expect the Texans to do what they did last year? No. Let's not act like because Nick Caserio had already been in Houston and he had already started putting some of the pieces of the puzzle together doesn't mean that we were expecting the Texans to do what they did last year. They still came out of nowhere and surprised everyone. But there was also a foundation already set. We didn't know how good it was at the time, but there was already a foundation being set there. We're literally setting the foundation now, and the concrete hasn't even begun to dry yet. So I think it's going to be more like, I think it's going to be closer to the Lions' first season than the 49ers' first season with new management, new coaching staff. And unlike the Lions, who started, I think, 0-6 or whatever that first year under Dan Campbell, I don't see that happening with us. But what I don't see is us being 2-14 like the 49ers were in Shanahan's first year. That's what I don't see. And I don't see us being 0-6 like the Lions were in their first season with Dan Campbell as their head coach, with Brad Holmes in his first year as GM. I don't see that happening either. Somewhere in the middle, we'll be a solid team. We'll fight tooth and nail. We'll be in ball games. Will we have enough to win? I think that's the $1 million question. But I'm going to just enjoy the ride. Just like you said, Jamal. I'm just going to, enjoy whatever comes and take it in stride. That's going to be hard. What I realized last year is that a lot of fans offer a ton of lip service during the offseason. A lot of people don't practice what they preach. I saw that in spades last year. I was actually quite disappointed in some of you because we had these conversations last year about, what we wanted to see from the team and understanding that it could get a lot worse before it gets better. But if it doesn't go well, it might be for the betterment of the team because Rivera won't be here. He had to win last year. And I remember saying, it's a process. And if part of the process is for Rivera not to be good, to get him out of here. And because remember, a lot of us didn't even want him back. He offered up Scott Turner as a sacrificial lamb, and that satisfied some of us. But a lot of you were like, nah. I remember Ms. P was like, man, get Ron the hell out of here. He's still trash. Nothing has been solved. He's still here, and he's garbage as a head coach. He's mediocre at best. And I talked about, hey, y'all got to be willing to take y'all lumps. If this is what you really, if true sustainable success is what you're after, you've got to be willing to do the work. You've got to be willing to go through the process. And a lot of you will say in the offseason, yeah, sign me up. I'm ready. And then when you get to the regular season and some tough losses happen and you find yourself not getting it done here or not getting it done there, you're not down for the process anymore. This is a large undertaking. You don't just show up and start winning football games in this league. That is not how it works. If that were the case, the same 5 teams wouldn't be getting to the Super Bowl or the NFC or the AFC Championship game every damn year. Like, we can sit here and talk about parity all we want. 4 teams make the playoffs in the upcoming season that weren't in the playoffs the year before. We talk about that all the time, but it's the same 4 or 5 teams making it to the damn championship game. It's the San Francisco 49ers every year. It's the Kansas City Chiefs every year. It's the Cincinnati Bengals every year. There are other teams that are hovering around like Buffalo and Baltimore. It's the same shit. Different toilet. Every year. Green Bay is always in the mix. Doesn't matter who the hell the quarterback is. Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre, Jordan Love. They always in the goddamn playoffs, and they always hovering around the NFC Championship game. They were within a quarter of going to the NFC Championship game in Jordan Love's first season as a starter because they have sustained success. They have a blueprint. We may not agree with that blueprint, and sometimes it may be unconventional, i.e. not drafting a first-round receiver. They haven't done it in over 2 decades. They don't believe in investing in first-round receivers in Green Bay. And we mock them. I mean, we tore them to shreds for not drafting a first-round receiver a couple of years ago. It was the blind leading the blind, and yet Jordan Love seemed to see very clearly last year. If you really, truly want sustained success, you've got to go through the process. And I think we're heading down that path now, so I'm excited. Anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on this installment of the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys. If you're into the podcast, I'll see you tomorrow. Super Friends, tomorrow night, 8 p. Should be a lot of fun. Chopping it up with the fellas. So if you're not doing anything, come check us out. It's always fun when the band gets back together. So we'll be talking NFC East football tomorrow night. Wednesday, I think I'll be back for the Command Post Live on Wednesday. Thursday, I think, is going to be a bit of a janky day. So we will see how everything goes. Now the NBA Finals is out of the way, we can get back to some level of normalcy now where we're not doing these extremely late streams that are starting at 11, 11:15, 11:30, all of that jazz. We can get back to a more traditional time slot on the East Coast. For those West Coasters or people in different time zones, these times might have been perfect for them. But for us East Coasters, some of these streams are probably brutal for you. Like, yo, I catch you on the playback, bro. I can't mess with you at 11:30 at night. Noted. I am not mad at you for that. So we'll be able to get back to a more traditional time slot. And I look forward to reading your responses to some of the questions that I asked on the show tonight, including, would you do the Brandon Aiyuk deal? De'Ami Brown, a second and a fourth in 2025 for Brandon Aiyuk. Remember, you're still going to have to pay him. Somebody posed the question, would you do it for just a 2? I think it was Door Gunner. Would you just do it for a 2? I don't know. Somebody asked. I don't remember. It might not have been Door Gunner, but somebody asked, would you just do it for a 2? No. I think I'd seriously entertain it. But again, I myself want to see how this season turns out before I do anything rash. I'd really much prefer to see what we have in Luke McCaffrey, Jahan Dotson, and Terry McLaurin as a trio, with Jaden Daniels and the tight end position being what it could potentially be with Ben Sinnott and Zach Ertz, and then the running back position. And it's just so many more weapons now. I want to see this kind of come to fruition, what it manifests itself into. And then if it isn't enough after the season, then maybe you make a move like going out and signing Brandon Aiyuk in free agency. I doubt that the 49ers slapped the franchise tag on him. But they could do the same thing the Kansas City Chiefs did this past offseason, knowing that they weren't going to be able to re-sign their star corner. They franchise tagged him and waited for a team that was desperate enough, hungry enough to cough up the capital and pay him. And so they were able to not just let him walk in free agency, but they were able to recoup a pick for his services. So maybe the 49ers do something like that next year. Who's to say? But anyway, I digress. Kimura, been a member for 8 months. Really appreciate you. Who writes, "Hey Lou, what's up, Kimura? What is BA worth? 30 mil per year like Amara?" I don't. We went through this already, right? We went through, like, Amara has been pretty consistent his entire career, and he put up ridiculous numbers last year. I don't think Aiyuk. I think we said he was in that range with where Amara is, but I think he should be slotted right under Amara St. Brown, right? Like, he's not up there with the CeeDee Lambs and the AJ Browns and those types of guys. He just had a massive year though. Did Brandon Aiyuk? I think he was over 1,500 yards this past season, I believe. I think. Don't quote me on that. 1,300. Excuse me. He had over 1,300 yards this past season. And the year prior was his first 1,000-yard season. He's been pretty consistent throughout his career, though. No season less than 748 yards in his first 4 years. But the last two have been over 1,000, and last year was over 1,300. And he also had almost 18 yards per reception. So, meanwhile, let's go to Amon-Ra St. Brown. His last two seasons, and for Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's only been in the league 3 years. Obviously, he's not a first-round pick like Brandon Aiyuk, so they didn't have the luxury of, picking up the fifth-year option. This, in a sense, was going to be his last year of his rookie contract because he only was under contract for 4 years. So his first 3 years, though, his lowest season was his rookie season, 912 yards for Amon-Ra St. Brown. But every season since that, rookie season, he's been over 100 catches and over 1,000 yards, over 1,100. He had 1,161 in 2022 on 106 catches and 6 touchdowns. That number ballooned to 1,515 yards on 119 receptions. So the average went up, the catches went up, the yards went up, and the touchdowns went to double figures for the first time in his career at 10. I don't think Aiyuk had a double-digit season in touchdowns, never in his career. So they're not the same receiver. Not only is Amon-Ra St. Brown better as a volume receiver because you throw it to him, 200 times a year, and he's going to catch you throw it to him 160 times a year, and he's going to catch 119 of them. Aiyuk has never had more than 78 catches in a season. Amon-Ra St. Brown has never had less than 90 in his career. Right? They're not the same receiver, if you ask me. I think Amon-Ra is better than Aiyuk and worth more than Aiyuk. But again, Aiyuk isn't going to go for that. And like I said, the next guy is the highest guy, right? The next guy is the guy that's going to get, the most money. And so if I'm a team looking to pay Brandon Aiyuk, I'm looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown's deal. I'm saying, you're not better than him, bro. You're not. And if you want good money, I'm willing to pay you upwards of $30 million, but Amon-Ra St. Brown's deal is worth 30 on the head a year. 4 years, 120, 77 million guaranteed. And that's what I'm talking about. That's over 60% of that deal, probably going closer to 70, about 65% or so of that deal. Let's see. 77 million it was guaranteed of that deal. Let's see what 77% of 120 is. That is 64%. Almost 65% of that deal is fully guaranteed. That's what it's about. But that's 30 on the head. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a better receiver. I think he's in that neighborhood, is Aiyuk, but I would want him to be slotted under. Like, in a perfect world, that's not how this works, though, right? That's not how this works. As an agent, your job is for him to get more than the guy that just got paid. That's how you push the ball further for the next guy that's coming along. So the expectation isn't that he's going to fall in line underneath Amon-Ra St. Brown where he belongs. My guess is he'll push somewhere in that middle range between Amon-Ra St. Brown and probably wherever AJ Brown is. Is he at 33? I think AJ's at 33. AJ Brown contract. 3 years, 96. So that's 32 a year. So somewhere in that mix is where you'll find Aiyuk, I think. Maybe he'll exceed the 32 that AJ got, which is crazy if he does, but I could see that happening. Not by much, because then you start approaching Justin Jefferson territory. Because what did he sign? 35, right? If I'm not mistaken, Justin Jefferson contract. I think it was 35. 4 years, 140. I believe that is good for 35 per. 4 years, 140. Yeah, 35. And Aiyuk's not even close. He's not even in that stratosphere. CeeDee Lamb's gonna either get more than Justin Jefferson or fall just under his contract. To me, Aiyuk should be getting like 28 and a half, 29 million, 29 and a half if you wanted to get as close as you could. But he shouldn't be getting 30 a year. That's my personal opinion. But again, that's not usually how these things work. They're not usually common sense, deals that get done. So anyway, I digress. But yes, he should be in that Amon-Ra St. Brown neighborhood. Slightly under him, but he should be right in that neighborhood. That's where he should be slotted, but that's probably not what's going to happen. I can't wait to see what it is he ultimately gets. I think you're going to have to wait till next year because, I disagree with my guy, John Perez. He thinks I'm wrong on this. He thinks someone's going to trade for Brandon Aiyuk and pay him. I don't. I think teams they're pretty good at where they are right now, from the draft to free agency, trades. If you were going to do something, you'd have done it already. I feel like, again, the only way that something transpires is one of two things. There's a major injury in camp to a team that has Super Bowl aspirations, and knowing that they can go out, they'll have to give up something for Aiyuk, probably a second-round pick, but knowing that he comes off the books next year, it's a one-year rental. There's not a lot that's that you invest in giving. You're just giving up a draft pick now, and it's going to sting. But if you think you got a window to win a Super Bowl, if you're the Buffalo Bills and you think you can win a Super Bowl, and again, I don't know if they have the financial cap space and the means to do that. But if somebody goes down in camp and you're left without a big time target for Josh Allen, maybe you entertain trading for a guy like Aiyuk, knowing that it's one and done. You're probably not going to be able to re-sign him next year, but it gives you a chance to win the Super Bowl this year. I can see something like that transpiring. And then I think trade deadline is the only other option that exists. But again, you got to be in a similar spot where you think you can win a Super Bowl and you just need one more piece. With the way your season has gone to that point, a guy like Aiyuk pushes you over the top. Or you could be like the Bears, and we've talked about this. And maybe this is where a team like Washington gets aggressive, because Shanahan did that while our GM, Adam Peters, was there. When they needed a quarterback, they sniffed around Kirk Cousins. Our dumb organization said no. They wanted to give us a first-round pick. Instead, they had to go to plan B, which was to trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. They did that in season at the trade deadline. He finished up the season undefeated, and the rest is history in San Francisco. They didn't trade for a guy that they thought could help them that year. It was really about the future. And we've seen teams like the Bears do that philosophically. Go out, trade for Chase Claypool at the trade deadline. That didn't work. But then the following year, they traded for Montez Sweat at the trade deadline. That did work. So those teams those Bears teams weren't going to win anything, but they were looking for guys that could help their rosters in the future. Maybe a team like Washington, or the Steelers for that matter, see that as an option at the trade deadline. We'll see. Anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on this installment of the Command Post. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys next time. Until then, you guys take care. Have a good one. Congratulations to the Boston Celtics and all of their fans that are out there. Celebrate! Your team has won the Larry O'Brien Trophy. Until next time, have a good one.